Hey everyone, it's Megan here from Megan Makes Do, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the Mirna Tote. For this tutorial, we're using 24/7 cotton from Lion Brand in the color silver, as well as a size D crochet hook, which is a 3.25 millimeter. Now this is a really small hook for this yarn, so take your time and go slow. So we're going to start by making a magic ring. And when I'm making my ring, I like to pinch it right here and then pull my fingers out of there and then grab my working yarn. And then this will allow me to make my first 2 chains. So we're going to start row 1 with a chain 2. The chain 2s do not count as a stitch for the hexagon here and throughout. And then we're going to work 12 double crochet stitches directly into our magic loop. Okay, so here I've worked my 12 stitches, and we'll just count them real quick to double check that I have 12 double crochets. And I'm going to pull the end of my magic loop and pull that tight. And then to finish round 1, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the first stitch. We're going to skip the chain 2 since it doesn't count as a stitch, and slip stitch right into the first stitch of round 1. And that completes the round. For round 2, we're going to go ahead and again start with a chain 2, which again does not count as a stitch. And then for this round, we're actually going to be starting to form our hexagon. So in the same stitches I joined, I'm going to work my first corner, which is a double crochet, chain 2, and then another double crochet right into that same stitch I just worked. So this is all going into the joining chain, or joining stitch, I should say. So that's our first corner of our hexagon. Next, I'm going to work 1 double crochet in the next stitch. And we're going to actually be repeating that all the way around. So next, I'm going to work another corner, a double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet into the same stitch. And then a single double crochet in the next stitch. And again, I'm just going to repeat that going all the way around until I get to the end. So here I've reached the end. I'm going to work my last corner stitch. So this will be my 6th corner for my hexagon. And then I'm going to work my last double crochet into that last stitch that we have. And that would complete round 2. So again, skipping the chain 2, I'm going to slip stitch to the top of the first stitch to join that round. And this is what you'll have at the end of round 2. Now, if your piece starts to kind of fold in on itself, that's okay. Once we're done, we can block it to get it to lay straight. So again, for round 3, we start with the chain 2, and then we work a double crochet into the same stitch that we joined into. And now we're going to work a corner stitch, and from here on out we're going to be working our corner stitches into the chain 2 space of the corner in the row below. So I'm going to work a double crochet, chain 2, and another double crochet right into that chain 2 space. And now you'll see that we have 3 double crochet before our next corner. So we work 1 double crochet into each one of those stitches. So 3 double crochet, 2 and 3, and then we'll work another corner stitch into the chain 2 space. So we'll always be working a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet for each corner stitch for our hexagon. And then again, I'm going to work 3 double crochet across and then another corner stitch, and we're going to do that all the way around our hexagon until we get to our last corner. Okay, so here we are. I've worked our last corner and now I have 2 double crochets left. Since we started with 1 and we have 3 on each side, I'm going to make sure that I'm making 2 double crochet in the last stitches. And then I will slip stitch again, skipping the chain 2. We're going to go right into the first stitch of our round to join, and that is the end of round 3. For round 4, again, start with the chain 2, work a double crochet into the same stitch that we joined into, and a double crochet into the next stitch. Then we'll work a corner stitch into the chain 2 space. So a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. And now on each side of our hexagon, we're going to have 5 stitches to work across. So work 5 double crochet across until you reach the next corner. Okay, so now we've hit the next corner. And again, just like before, we're going to be working into that chain 2 space, and we're going to work the double crochet, chain 2, double crochet back into the same chain 2 space to make our next corner. So again, work 5 double crochet and then a corner stitch going all the way around until we get to that last corner. Okay, so now we're going to work our last corner of round 4. Double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet back into that same chain 2 space. Okay, so now I'm going to have 3 double crochets to work across. Again, there's 5 on each side of our hexagon, and since we started with 2, we will end with 3. And then we'll slip stitch to the top of the first stitch to join round 4. Okay, so now we're on to round 5, which is our last round for a hexagon. So again, start with your chain 2, work your double crochet into the same stitch as your join, and work a double crochet into the next 2 stitches. Then you'll work a corner into the chain 2 space, and now we're going to have 7 stitches on each side of our hexagon. So I'm going to go ahead and double crochet 7 across until I hit the next corner. Okay, so I'm working our next corner stitch into the chain 2 space, and again all the way around we're going to do 7 double crochets on the sides and then work a corner. So here we've worked our last corner, and now again, since we have 7 on each side and I started with 3 double crochet, I'm going to end with 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then since this was our last round, I am not going to slip stitch for this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten off. So go ahead and cut your yarn, leaving a little bit of a long tail for seaming, and then go ahead and pull that yarn through and get a tapestry needle and thread that onto the end of your yarn. And what we're going to do is an invisible join. So in the second stitch of the row, insert your needle from front to back underneath the loops, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put our needle into the last stitch, but right in the middle of the stitch between the 2 bars, and then we're going to pull that tight. And what that's going to do is it's going to create almost like a fake stitch on top of the first stitch of the row, and that will ensure that we always have an even number of stitches across. We won't have like an extra little stitch in there, since we want all 6 sides of our hexagon to have 7 stitches. So from there, I just weave in the end, and I like to go down the double crochets towards the center of the hexagon. Make sure that you're like securing it, but also making sure you're not pulling too tightly on that last stitch. And then I like to weave it back up towards the edge of the hexagon, and then I make one more pass through towards the center of the hexagon. So I like to weave my ends in 3 times like that, just to make sure that it's super secure. The 24/7 cotton can be a little bit tricky to get your needle through, so take your time with this and go slow. But that's how I'll weave in the end, and then I'd weave in that last end where we started from, and that would finish off our hexagon. And again, you're going to make 26 of these for your Mirna tote. Okay, to start our trapezoid, we're going to start by putting a slip knot on our hook, and then we are going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So then we're going to be working into the 4th chain, that very first chain, and this chain 3 that we're left with is going to count as our first stitch. So we're going to go ahead and double crochet 5 into the first chain that we made, so the 4th chain from our hook, which will give us 6 stitches total, since the chain 3s of our trapezoids do count as a stitch. Okay, so that's row 1 of our trapezoid. So we'll have 6 stitches. And for row 2, we're going to chain 3. Again, it counts as a stitch. We're going to turn, and we're going to work 2 double crochet into that first stitch. So even though the chain 3 counts as a stitch in our stitch counts, we're still working into the first stitch each time because we're adding a stitch at the end. So we work 2 double crochet into the first stitch, and then we work a corner stitch into the next. And again, a corner stitch is a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into the same stitch. And we'll have 2 corners for each trapezoid. So in the next stitch, we're going to work 1 double crochet, and then the following stitch we'll do another corner. So just like how our hexagons in round 2 had 3 double crochet in between, well, I guess we're creating 3 with the corners, but had 1 double crochet in between the corners, we're going to do the same thing. So the spots in between the 2 corners will match up. Okay, and in the next stitch, we're going to work 2 double crochet, and then we're going to work a double crochet into that chain 3 space, or I guess the top of the chain 3. And that will finish off round 2. So we just want to make sure we're trying to keep this edge as straight as possible. For round 3, we're going to start again with the chain 3, counts as a stitch, but again, we're going to work into that first stitch. So we're going to work a double crochet in each stitch across until we get to the corner. So it should be 4 double crochet plus our chain 3. Then we're going to work a corner stitch into the chain 2 space. So we're going to work a double crochet, chain 2, and then another double crochet right into that same chain 2 space. And now we're going to work 3 double crochet across until we hit our next corner. Okay, and now I've hit the next chain 2 space, and I'm going to work another corner. Okay, and then I'm going to work 3 double crochet over the next 3 stitches. And then I'm going to work 2 double crochet into the top of the chain 3. So it can be a little tricky to get your hook in there. Just do the best you can and take your time. But we're going to work 2 double crochet into the top of the chain 3 so that our sides will match. So you want to always make sure we have the same number of stitches on either side. For row 4, we're going to chain 3 again and turn. And then we're going to work double crochets all the way across until we hit our first corner. Okay, so here's our first corner, and again we're going to work a double crochet, chain 2, and then another double crochet all into that chain 2 space. So now in between our 2 corners, we're going to have 5 double crochets. So just work a double crochet in each stitch across until you get to the next corner. Okay, so here's our next corner. Again, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into the chain 2 space. Okay, so now we're going to work a double crochet into each stitch across. And I believe we should have 5 double crochets. Oops. 3, 4, and 5. And then just like our last row, we're going to work 2 double crochet into the top of the chain 3. And this way we're making sure we have the same number of stitches on this side of our trapezoid as we do on the opposite side. Okay, so that's the end of row 4 of our trapezoid. So yeah, we're making sure that we have the same number of stitches along each side of our trapezoid. Okay, so now we're going to work our last row, row 5, by again chaining 3, turning our work, and working along each stitch. So 1 double crochet in each stitch across until we hit that first corner. Okay, so here we are at our corner, and again work a corner stitch to that chain 2 space, same as all our previous rows. And then again work a double crochet across each one of the stitches in between the corners. Okay, so here we are at our last corner, and we're going to work a double crochet, chain 2 double crochet just as our previous corner into that chain 2 space. And again we're going to work a double crochet into each stitch across until we get to our chain 3. Okay, and again we're going to work 2 double crochet into the top of our chain 3. And this will complete row 5 of our trapezoids. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of finish off the edge, the raw edge of our trapezoid, just to make it easier for when we attach our straps. So I'm going to chain 1, and into the end of each row, I'm going to work 2 single crochet. So I should end up with 20 single crochet going across that raw edge of our trapezoid. Okay, we're going to work our last single crochet across, and then we can fasten off, and you can leave a longer tail on your trapezoids for seaming, but you can see that now we have a nice, more smooth edge along the raw edge of our trapezoid. And don't forget to make 10. Okay, so now that we have all of our hexagons and all of our trapezoids all finished, I've got my ends woven in, it's time to start seaming them together. So I'm going to show you how to do that, but first I do want to show you just kind of how you're going to seam them together. I have included a chart that will show you exactly where to place all of your hexagons and trapezoids. You can find that on the website, on the blog, or if you've purchased the PDF, you'll find it on there too. So here's our chart. It's going to look a little funny. I promise it's going to look like a tote bag when we're done. But this will show you exactly where to place your hexagons and trapezoids. And you'll see that our trapezoids are going to be on either end, as well as there's 2 on the sides. That's going to be the bottom part of our tote bag. So following the chart that is included in the pattern, and then using a tapestry needle and a long piece of your 24/7 cotton yarn, we're going to be using the mattress stitch to seam them together. So I like to seam with the right sides facing up, and we're going to be lining up the edge stitches and then the first chain of each corner for either side. So I'm going to go from the bottom, always going up from the bottom through the top of my first stitch on the left hexagon, making sure to leave a little bit of a tail for weaving in. And then I'm going to go directly over to the right hexagon, and again going through the same coordinating stitch. So in that second chain in my corner, going up from the bottom, pulling through the top, pull my yarn through, and then I'm not going to pull tight just yet, just so that you can see how the yarn will zigzag back and forth. And then I'm just going to keep going back and forth. So I'm going to go back to the left side, go up from the bottom to the top, going through both loops of each stitch, pull my yarn through, and then we're going to go back over to the right side, the right hexagon, and into that same coordinating stitch. So the one right after the chain, up from the bottom to the top, and pull my yarn through. Okay, and then we're just going to keep going back and forth from side to side, always working from the bottom of our work to the top, always going through both loops of each stitch. So that was my third stitch on the left side. I'm going to go through the third stitch on the right side now, and keep doing that back and forth all the way across. And now you can see if I pull my yarn tight, it draws the hexagons together, and it will give me a nice, beautiful looking seam. So we're just going to continue to do this back and forth all the way up until we hit those first 2 chains on either hexagon. Okay, so I'm working into the first chain of the corner on the right one to finish off that seam. So here you can see I've got my simple mattress stitch seam for my hexagons, and now I can continue to attach hexagons in that same manner. So here you'll see I ended on my right side, so I'm going to go through the first chain, I guess the right chain of the next hexagon corner. Again, always going from bottom to top, and pull that tight. And now on that side, I can go through the second chain of my first one. I'm going to move my seam across on this side of that hexagon. So you'll see that your chains of the corners will line up with each other. So now I'm going through the first stitch on the new hexagon, and then I'll go through the first stitch next to the corner on the previous hexagon. And again, zigzagging back and forth, always moving our needle from the bottom of our work to the top. I'm just going to zigzag across and work my mattress stitch until I hit the first set of chains on either side of the next 2 hexagons. Okay, so I'm going up through that last chain to connect those two sides. And here I've attached my third hexagon. And so we'll go back and do that seam as well, connecting those last two unworked chains together on that side. And we're going to keep doing this and keep adding hexagons, making sure that we're following our graph and that our piece looks like the chart that was provided. So here I'm going to show you how to attach one of the trapezoids into place. Again, it's going to be just like the hexagons. We're going to be connecting those sides, making sure that our stitches line up. And so since my yarn is attached here, I'm going to go ahead and go through the first chain of the side I want to work, so that first corner chain, and then in the previous hexagon I'm going to go through the second chain since the first chain was connected to the other hexagon. So again, just as before, I'm going to be working across this seam, going back and forth using the mattress stitch, and I'm going to complete the whole chart. Okay, so now I've seamed all of my hexagons and trapezoids together. Here's the top part of my bag all the way down to the bottom part of my bag. I'm going to flip this whole thing over so the wrong side is facing me. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to be lining up the top trapezoids where these 2 points come together. This is the top of the tote bag. So we want to make sure that our trapezoids are lined up. So here you can see I've got both those sides of my trapezoids lined up, and you'll see that we have one hexagon kind of hanging over. We're going to be folding these hexagons in and then seaming down those last 3 sides all the way across those hexagons, and again folding the last hexagon in and seaming across the last 2 sides. We're going to leave these corners open for now. So let me show you on this little chart that I've cut out. So here's what you'll end up with. When you're all done seaming, you're going to fold it or turn it over so the wrong sides are facing, fold it up so the trapezoids come together at the top. I'm just going to crease mine here to make it easier. So you'll see that the bottom of our bag is worked across those 2 hexagons and 2 trapezoids, but we've got 4 hexagons on either side, or 4 hexagons total, 2 on each side. We're going to fold those over like this and then seam going all the way around there until we get to the corner. Same on the other side, fold the hexagons over so they line up with the other side of the bag, and seam all the way down. Again, do not seam those corners together yet. We're going to wait until we're done seaming the sides. We're going to leave those corners open. Okay, so here I've seamed my sides together. You can see here's the top of my bag, my tote bag. Here is my side seam. Here's that first hexagon. I've gone around those 3 sides, down the side of this hexagon, and then down the first 2 parts of this last hexagon, and here's my corner. So you can see with my little paper one, it matches up. We've seamed down the sides and we've left our corner open. So I still have a piece of yarn attached. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up our corner. So kind of open up your bag at the bottom a little bit. So here's the full hexagon right here. It's this hexagon here on the paper. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make a seam across that hexagon going over the bottom part of that hexagon. So we don't want it on the outside. We're going to turn it in on the inside. So you're basically going to have almost all of the hexagon. You're going to fold it right where that first corner of row 2 is, or round 2 is, and then lay your trapezoid across so that you get a flat seam right there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stitch this in place, and it's okay to do it from the outside. It won't really show up too much. And again, I'm going to try to use as close to what a mattress stitch would be as possible. And these 2 hexagons at the bottom are going to be the bottom part of your bag. So here you can see I've tucked in my hexagon, I have my trapezoid laying on top, and again, we're gonna go up through the bottom, and we're just gonna kind of sew our seam along the trapezoid stitches and I guess the top part of the hexagon that we've folded in. So it can be a little tricky to get through the yarn, so take your time. But I'm just seaming this together, and this will create the bottom corners of our bag. Okay, so I'm making my last stitch of my seam, pulling that through, and here you can see that we've got our corner now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my needle into the inside. So here you can see, if we lay out our bag, that this is the corner. It gives it a nice like curved shape to it, and will give it more of a boxy bottom, and you'll be able to hold a little bit more in your tote bag. So you can see that's how it'll look. The bottom part will be on the bottom. There's our nice corner. And then I'm going to push my yarn to the inside of my bag. And then we're going to open that up, and you'll see here's the little point of our hexagon that we had folded in. And just to give it a little bit added security, I'm going to fold it over onto the trapezoid, and I'm going to tack it into place on the inside of the bag, making sure that my stitches don't go through to the front. So we're just going to seam across those two sides. This will help give it a little bit more stability. So it's almost like you're doing double the amount of seams for the bottom part of our bag. And don't worry about doing mattress stitch here either. You can just do a simple whip stitch. You can skip a few stitches, do every 2 or 3 stitches if you want. This is just to tag it into place to keep that corner down. So we'll go all the way across, and that will complete our first corner. Okay, so I finished my second corner, seaming that in place, and here is the top of my bag. I have my trapezoids lined up, and here where those points are is where we're gonna do our straps. So on either side, making sure that you're on one of these parts of the bag, so at the right or left side, we're going to join our yarn in any stitch, chain 1, and then single crochet into the same stitch as our join, and then we're going to single crochet in each stitch going all the way around our bag. And what we want to do is make sure that in these little, like, I guess indentations, or like the bottom part of the V's, just go right over to the next stitch. Don't worry about putting an extra stitch into the seams here, because we're going to continue to kind of create that downward V shape on the sides of our bag. And then we'll just single crochet into each stitch across. And again, we're going to be working across the tops of our trapezoids. And since we finished them off with a row of single crochet on the raw edge, it should be very simple to go all the way across using single crochets. Okay, so here we're at a seam, and what we want to do is make sure that we're adding one single crochet right in the center of this seam, right where the point of our trapezoids come together, where the top points of our bag are, because we'll need those stitches for our next round when we start to make the actual strap. So we want to make sure that we're keeping the point, and we've added that extra stitch into the seam, and we're going to just continue to do that all the way around, and then we'll join with our first stitch. Okay, so here we are. I just finished the first round going around the top of our bag, so I'm just going to slip stitch to the first stitch to join, and then we're going to continue working up until this first point right where this seam is, where the trapezoids are. So I'm going to chain 1 and single crochet into the same stitch as my join, and I'm going to go all the way around until I get to the point. And what I do in this little like divot section is I'll usually skip one of the stitches to help create that divot, that little dip on the sides. So if you're noticing like your bag starts like flaring out on the sides, I recommend skipping one stitch in that little divot area on the sides. So I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get to that point. So here we are, we're almost to that stitch. So just find the stitch that lines up the best with the seam of the trapezoids, and that's where we'll start working our strap. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be making chains, and this is going to become our strap, and our strap is going to connect from one point. We're going to chain all the way up and down and then connect it to the second point on that same side of the bag. So go ahead and start chaining. You're going to chain 100 chains for each strap, so on each side of the bag. If you want your strap to be shorter or taller, you can go ahead and add or subtract chains here in order to get the desired length that you want your straps to be. Okay, so here I have my 100 chains. Just make sure that your chains don't accidentally get twisted. And we're going to go right over to the next point on that same side. And I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into the stitch where the point is, where the seam is of the next two trapezoids. And then I'm just going to continue to single crochet all the way around And again, skipping one stitch in that little dip on the side of the bag if needed. And I'm going to single crochet around until I get to the next point on the other side of the bag. And then again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going all the way around until I get to this next point. Once I get to that point, I'll go ahead and chain 100 again, connect to the next point here, and then single crochet around and join with the first stitch that I did for round 2. Okay, so I'm back and we're doing round 3. So I've started round 3, same as before, chain 1, single crochet in the same stitches, join, and then single crochet all the way around. And this time when we get to our chains, we're going to go ahead and work 1 single crochet into every chain stitch of our strap. And we're going to do that all the way across the strap. So now we'll be working up our sides a little bit higher, as well as adding some width to our straps. So I'm just going to continue to single crochet all the way around the chains of this strap, and then I'm going to continue to go all the way around the other side of the bag, up the other strap, and back around the other side until I finish this whole round. Okay, so I finished round 3, and then I went ahead and did round 4 and 5, which is just the same. You're just going to single crochet all the way around, going around the strap and around both sides, and then of course skipping one of those stitches in the center. On this side here, you can see I've skipped some stitches. Just in the center, I'll skip one of those stitches just so I can keep that little V shape going. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be the same stitch every time. And then when we get to the end of our last round, we're going to go ahead and fasten off, and we're going to work that invisible join, same as we did for the hexagons. So grab your tapestry needle and thread the end of your yarn onto the needle, and then again in the second stitch from the beginning, you're going to push your needle through from the front to the back under both loops of that stitch, pull it tight, and again we're going to be covering up that first stitch in that round with this like fake invisible join stitch. So then we're going to go through the center of the very last stitch of the round, pull it tight, make sure it's looking right and it looks even, and that's how we'll finish the top of our bag. And then we'll just weave in our ends and we'll be all done. And this is how you'll make your Mirna tote. Remember that you can find the full written pattern on my website, meganmakesdo.com, as well as a PDF printable version of the instructions if you'd like to go that route too.